Hi, I'm Bob Maxwell, your auto tape tour guide through fascinating Jasper National Park. If you took the auto tape tour from Banff National Park, then you know how to operate your cassette. But if you've just started your auto tape tour at Columbia Icefield, let me tell you how to get the most out of it. You'll notice that the speed limit along most of this road is 60 miles an hour. I'm timed to fit that speed, so it's important that you keep as close to that as possible. The main thing for you to remember is whenever you stop the car, you must turn me off. Before we get to a recommended viewpoint, you'll hear this. That's your signal to flick me off. You won't flick me on again till after we've left the viewpoint and are back on the road headed for our next stop. When we leave a viewpoint, I'll let you know how many miles it is to our next stop, so you'll have an idea of when to start looking for the viewpoint turnoffs. Got it now? Just 3 simple things. Keep as close to 60 miles an hour as possible. When we stop, turn me off. When we resume our drive, turn me on. Incidentally, before we reach our first scheduled stop, the Stutfield Glacier viewpoint, we'll pass the Summit viewpoint. That is not one of our stops. But you're the boss, and if you wish to stop there for a moment, do. Just remember, when you turn into the parking area, it'll be on our left. You must turn me off. When we leave the parking area, turn me on again. That way we'll keep synchronized. As we're passing the Summit viewpoint, we'll be about 6,700 feet above sea level. From there, our drive will gradually take us downward, and by the time we get to Jasper, we'll be 3,402 feet above sea level. The part of the road we're coming to is one of those sections that presented such a problem to the engineers who designed it. It was here that the Wilcox Peak had thrust a determined shoulder across the valley, barring completely a way through. Early fur traders and explorers with their pack trains climbed over the peak and its shoulder by way of Wilcox Pass. But structurally, that route was too precarious for building a major highway. When the designers of this highway agreed on that, they decided to spiral up and around the obstruction. The road begins a slow, long climb, and at the summit, swings out to the verge of the rocky wall, below which the river can be heard boiling through the deep canyons. It's a lot shorter and certainly a lot safer than the way the early explorers traveled. Did you know that Jasper National Park is the second largest park in all of North America? Wood buffalo in Alberta and the Northwest Territory is the largest, and probably the most difficult to reach. How Jasper National Park came about geologically is a fascinating saga spanning millions of years. The human history, unfortunately, can't be traced back as far, or as scientifically, as the geological history. There's evidence, however, that this area was inhabited by man thousands of years ago. In fact, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts in these parts that they identify as stone weapons used by Indians as long as 9,000 years ago. Other than that, no written history of the earliest Indian settlers has yet been discovered. From our viewpoint at Stutfield Glacier, you can look down and see a good example of what is called a braided river flat. It is a valley bottom filled with sand and gravel with a river spread across it in interlacing channels. To the right and on the other side of the river, an alluvial fan spreads onto the valley flat. The alluvial fan is made up of rock waste from the Stutfield Glacier. If you'd like to take a short hike at Stutfield Glacier, there's a trail that'll take you 3 miles in to Beauty Creek. This fast-flowing mountain stream rises in the valley behind Tangle Ridge, then falls precipitously to the level of Sunwapta River. A short walk above the old bridge there will bring you to a deep canyon cut in limestone, gurgling with a profusion of lively waterfalls. Throughout the park, there are many developed and maintained trails to take you to the fascinating, out-of-the-way places unreachable by car. There are also campgrounds at key locations along the Banff-Jasper Highway. For those of you who want to take advantage of these facilities, there are certain regulations which must be followed. Park officials are fairly strict about their rules, and they should be. The park regulations were developed not only as safety measures to save your life, but as conservation measures to keep the park as a living museum for the many generations to come. For your own protection, registration is required if you plan to travel overnight off the main highway. You must register with a park warden before departure and report back on return. The reason for this is pretty obvious. In order to rescue travelers who don't return from climbing, trail, or camping trips, it's necessary for the park warden to know where people have gone, who is gone, and when they were expected to return. You may shut me off now. Hope you enjoy the views from Stutfield Glacier Viewpoint. Our next recommended viewpoint, Sunwapta Falls Junction, doesn't come up for a little over 24 miles, so settle in comfortably. But first, check the mileage on your gauge. Got it? Now you don't have to start looking for our next viewpoint sign until we've gone 24 miles. Jasper, like all Canadian mountain national parks, offers some excellent services to the tourist. For instance, at various campgrounds, you can get information on the nature trails you might want to follow. In some cases, you may wish to go alone, and in other cases, you may want to join a group headed by a park naturalist. Going along with a naturalist as your guide has a lot of advantages. He's delighted to answer any questions you may have on any aspect of the park, and will gladly show you how to identify various species of bird, animal, and plant life. He also knows a great deal and will be glad to tell you something about the geology and history of the area. At certain campgrounds during summer, you can enjoy illustrated talks with movies or slides. Park naturalists are anxious to cultivate appreciation of nature in forms from the highest mountain to the tiniest flower. No matter how naive or silly you might think your question sounds, do ask it of a park naturalist. They're really eager to have you know as much as you want to know about anything to do with their domain, the park. They would like you to leave the trails as they are for those who follow to enjoy. From time to time, you hear me use terms and words which may sound unfamiliar to you. Many of them refer to geological periods of time. For instance, if you hear me talking about Precambrian rocks, that means geologically, they were rocks formed sometime between 600 million and 3,500 million years ago. That was the Precambrian period. Other major geological time periods were the Paleozoic, covering from 225 million to 600 million years ago, the Mesozoic, stretching from 70 million to 225 million years ago, and the Cenozoic, going back from over 1 million to 70 million years ago. The ages of rocks are usually identified within these geological time periods. Because of the structure of the rocks in the park and the manner of their erosion, the youngest rocks are exposed in the eastern section of the park, and the oldest are exposed in the mountains and valleys of the western section. It's there you're most likely to see Precambrian rocks. How the rock formations were sculpted is largely a story of erosion caused by rain, running water, falling snow, moving ice, frost, and chemical decay. Of all these agents of erosion, running water has been one of the most important in the carving of the mountains as we know them. For millions of years, streams have carried away the debris of all the other agents of decay and erosion and have themselves carved their valleys deep into the landscape. The story of water erosion may begin on the highest peak. The freezing of a thin film of water under a boulder may wedge it out and send it tumbling over the edge of a cliff. Heavy rains may loosen rocks and boulders, or may lubricate others so that they become part of the downward rush. This is how bits and pieces of rocks are torn from the solid mountains and begin their long journey to the sea. The first stop for the loosened rocks may be in one of those long fan-shaped accumulations of angular blocks and pieces of rock which you see on the sides of every steep mountain. These are called talus or scree slopes. How long they remain there depends on nature's whims. A river may come sloshing across the bottom of the talus slope and carry off the boulders and rubble, so that angular pieces and fragments from the talus now become part of the mass of boulders, gravel, and sand in the bottoms of stream valleys. The constant rubbing of boulders and pebbles against one another gradually wears them down, and the fragments become very finely divided rock flour that resembles mud or silt in the water of the stream. That, then, is the procedure by which a mass of rock in the mountains is gradually worn away by the forces of erosion and carried ultimately to the sea, where it rests on the bottom as mud, silt, or sand. Some historians believe a number of Indians came here from the lower Rockies. In America, the advancing white man caused enough conflict among the tribes themselves so that some of the less powerful ones, in a simple act of self-preservation, finally struck out to find new places to settle. When they reached the Canadian Rockies, they found it provided them with fine shelter and abundant food. Bighorn sheep, Rocky Mountain goat, moose, deer, and elk were plentiful. By the time the first white men came here looking to make a fortune on furs, the Indians had explored the main valleys and probably traveled over most of the main passes of the Great Divide. Those Indians were a serious, no-nonsense people. They had little time for frivolity and were extremely religious. The sun was their god, and they paid homage to their deity in all their rituals. Even their dances were cheerless movements designed to beseech the favor of their gods. When the first white explorers and fur traders invaded this region, they were expected to, and did, respect the laws laid down by the Indian. This was Indian territory, and the Canadian government acknowledged and accepted their rules here. At first, many Indians acted as guides for the white man, and there was little trouble between them. It was probably when the big fur companies started to woo the Indians into their service that Indian civilization really began to disintegrate. The naive Indians were dazzled by the promises of affluence and easy living. The white man's influence made him repudiate ancient tribal wisdom, which forbade the unnecessary killing of animals. In less than 100 years, their game supply was exhausted. While the white man grew rich and prosperous, the Indians grew poorer, until finally they were forced to accept the herded life of reservation living. The early white men came here mostly because of the fantastic opportunities in the fur industry. In 1859, a new lure drew a fresh band of adventurers to the old trail: gold. The rumor spread that gold was buried in the Caribou region of central British Columbia. When a man named Mike Lauren and 4 of his cronies crawled out of the hills clutching gold, the rush was on. Wild stories of fortunes to be made in a few months spread rapidly. Prospectors flooded the hills with their pans and shovels and dreams of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Weeks of probing in the hills yielded small amounts of gold and large amounts of worn, ragged, footsore, disappointed would-be millionaires. How did Jasper National Park get its name? One of the local legends is that it was named after one of the earliest white settlers, Jasper Hawes, a Missourian who came here to do some independent fur trapping and trading. With his Indian wife and many children, he pursued his career and was eventually hired by one of the leading fur companies. Jasper Hawes became so well known in this area that his name was used as landmarks. People referred to the Northwest Company's post as Jasper's House, and later simply as Jasper House. How much of this is accurate, I don't know. Apparently, when this park was established, several names were suggested as its official name. Somehow the name Jasper, which had been associated with this area for so many years, seemed the only really appropriate name. And in 1907, the park was officially named Jasper National Park. The town of Jasper was originally named Fitzhugh, and the first building was erected in 1911. In the same year, the first road was constructed. It went from Jasper to Pyramid Lake. On the shore of Lac Beauvert in 1915, the 2 Brewster brothers set up 8 tent houses for summer use by park visitors. In 1921, the whole kit and caboodle was purchased from the brothers by the Canadian National Railways. And the same year, construction of Canadian National Railway's Jasper Park Lodge got underway. In 1923, a scenic road was built to take tourists to Mount Edith Cavell, which is one of the picturesque stops on your autotape tour. In 1938, a road was built to Miette Hot Springs. Our road now curves down to the valley and runs for long, relaxing miles through lodgepole, white and black spruce forests and along the river flats. It's a tranquil, peaceful drive, and even the river seems to forget it's in a hurry. In fact, in some spots, it hardly seems to be moving at all. To the east, though, 4 tumultuous streams come plunging madly down 4 parallel valleys. All will eventually join the Sunwapta River. The Indians used all 4 as routes out to the plains. The first of these, we just passed it before Stutfield Glacier Viewpoint, was over Wilcox Pass and down Tangle Creek. The second to join the Sunwapta flows out through a fine gorge, falling over a ledge of rock in a charming waterfall. This is called Stanley Falls, and it's located east of our highway. The third stream we'll pass is Jonas Creek, and the last and most important is Pobocton Creek. Between Pobocton and Jonas bridges, you'll come upon a great boulder field with scattered trees and small ponds. If you look at the slopes to the east at that point, you'll see a great scar in the hillside. What you see are pinkish rocks. They are the remains of a tremendous landslide that took place about 70 or 80 years ago. The loosened rocks ripped down the slope, tumbled across the road we're now on, and landed on the bottom of the river valley. There are many versions of a legend about Pobocton Creek. The one I heard goes something like this. Many ages ago, bands of stony Indians used this spot as a resting place on their long journey back from a hunting trip. Here, the braves would meet their women and children and spend the night telling of their brave forest hunts. In the morning, after a well-deserved rest, they would pack their belongings and head for home. The scene of this legendary event begins at dusk. A small group of stony Indians are seated around their campfire. They are weary, but in a festive mood because their hunt has yielded much. As they tell their women and children of their brave and skillful deeds, an eagle circles high above their heads. In its arrogant clutch is a struggling baby owl. One of the younger braves, who had not fared too well on the hunt, sees the opportunity to impress the pretty young maiden he loves. He seizes his bow, aims, and sends an arrow that hits the bird. His shy sweetheart gleams with pride as the men cheer his marksmanship. The lad is so anxious to present the eagle feathers to his beautiful maiden that when the bird falls on the other side of the river, the boy plunges in the water to fetch it. His people call for him to come back, but it is too late. In an instant, the youth is caught up and swallowed by the turbulent waters. After days of searching the river below the falls, his saddened people give up, and with heavy heart, decide to return home. They try to persuade the frail, inconsolable girl to go with them, but she insists on staying. She refuses to believe her handsome young brave is dead, and she vows never to close her eyes until she sees her lover again. Reluctantly, her people leave. She stands quietly on the bank of the river, gazing steadily at the rushing waters. It grows dark. She becomes tired and frightened of the long, lonely night that stretches before her. But she is determined, and she refuses to succumb to the sleep that tries to wrap itself around her eyelids. It becomes midnight. She can see nothing but the blackness around her. She begins to weep softly, for she is afraid her lover will appear, but that she will not see him because of the darkness. Suddenly, she is startled by a gentle flapping sound. She looks about her and sees 2 huge pairs of eyes glaring at her. At first, she does not understand, but slowly it reaches her. 2 owls have been sent by some great spirit so that her nocturnal vigil can be kept through their eyes. It is said that even now, if you have love in your heart, you can see this beautiful young Indian maiden and 2 owls sitting at the edge of the creek, waiting for her lover's return. I don't know how much of that legend is true, but let me say this. The stony Indian word for owl is Pobocton, which is what they named the creek. By the way, I think the owl is a very misunderstood bird. While it's generally regarded with superstitious aversion, it is, in fact, nearly always harmless. It's totally bewildered by daylight, and when frightened, it hisses like a cat. Did you know that most owls have poor eyesight and must depend on their hearing ability? An owl's ears, in fact, are rather peculiarly developed. The opening on one side faces upward, and the opening on the other side faces downward. I guess owls naturally hear everything in living stereo. In Banff and Jasper National Parks, several locations are named after animals. In Jasper, both Whistler's Mountain and Marmot Basin ski area are named in honor of the friendly but shy marmot. Marmots are dark brown or grayish and grow to about 2 feet long. When winter sets in, the marmot plugs up the door of his home, rolls himself up comfortably into an entwining mass, and adjusts his breathing to an almost imperceptible tempo and hibernates. Other times of the year, they can often be seen along the trails in high country. Nature has given them a remarkable protective coloring. If the stone you're studying happens to start moving, don't be alarmed. It's only a marmot, and he's probably more nervous than you. Look over to the east side of the valley. The separate peaks have disappeared, and there is a long, unbroken ridge, which some bored or weary traveler named the Endless Chain. It's not really endless, but it does go on for many miles. Over to the west, you can see a great mountain mass. It extends as far as the angle formed by the junction of the Athabasca and Sunwapta rivers. For some reason, nobody's taken the trouble to name any of the peaks in that range. So if you feel like naming any of them after yourself, be my guest. The weather during the summer here in the Rockies is usually very good. The days are generally warm and fair, the nights cool and comfortable. Thunderstorms are quite common, especially in late afternoons. It's said that years ago the Indians gave thunder the personality of a man, an evil man. At the beginning of time, according to an old Indian legend, an Indian and his wife were sitting in their lodge when thunder came and struck them. The Indian fell to the floor and lay for a long time as though he were dead. When he finally rose, he looked about and saw his wife was gone. Oh, he thought, she has gone to get wood or water, and he sat down to wait for her. But night came, and she did not return. The Indian, still dazed by the attack, went out of the lodge and asked his people if they had seen her. No one had. He searched the whole camp, but couldn't find his wife. It was then he knew that thunder had taken her away, and he went to the hills and mourned. All night he sat there, trying to think how he might get his wife back. When morning came, he rose and wandered, and when he met any animals, he would ask if they could tell him where thunder lived. Most of the animals would look at him as though he were crazy and walk away without bothering to reply. At last, a wolf said to him, "The animals do not know where thunder lives. We do not wish to know. He is our worst enemy. From others we can run, but from thunder there is no escape. Do not look for him, for surely he will strike you dead." The Indian would not listen to the advice of the wolf, and he continued his search, traveling a long distance. After many days, he came to a lodge in the middle of a forest. It was the home of the chief of all birds, the raven. "Welcome, friend," said the raven warmly. In short time, food was placed before the hungry, weary traveler. Not until he finished eating did the raven ask, "Why have you come?" "Thunder has stolen my wife," the Indian replied. "I am seeking his dwelling place, that I may find her and bring her home." "Are you so brave," asked the startled raven, "that you would enter the domain of vicious thunder?" The Indian nodded. "My life is empty and useless without my wife at my side," was the Indian's simple, honest reply. "Then I will tell you where thunder lives," said Raven, and he did. But before you go, I must tell you something. The Indian was impatient to start his journey, but he waited politely to hear what the raven had to say. "It is possible you don't know this," said the raven, "but my people are the only living beings that thunder cannot kill. Now, since you are so faithful and brave, I shall give you this." He pressed a raven's wing into the Indian's palm. "When you reach Thunder's lodge, point this raven's wing at him. He will be frightened and do whatever you ask. You shall have your wife back." The Indian thanked the raven and set out for Thunder's lodge. When he arrived, he entered and sat down by the doorway. On the other side of the lodge sat Thunder, frowning with anger at this intruder. "Why have you come?" he bellowed. "I seek my wife," said the Indian, "whom you have stolen." "No man may enter my lodge and live," shouted Thunder, rising to strike. The man pointed the raven wing at the outraged Thunder, and its effect was as magical as the raven had promised. Thunder reeled backward, spluttering helplessly. "Stop," he pleaded. "You shall have your wife." And then, roaring as only thunder can, a fierce gust of wind blew through the room. When it subsided, the Indian's wife stood at his side. "You are a man of great power," blustered Thunder. "We shall make peace. Here is my pipe," he said, handing his long wooden pipe to the Indian. "From now on, when I come to these hills in the springtime, you shall fill this pipe, light it, and you and your people shall smoke it and pray to me. In return, I shall bring the rain which makes all things grow." The following spring, the Indians were suffering a dry spell, and the Indian remembered about the pipe which Thunder had given him as a peace offering. After every grown male member of the tribe had puffed on the pipe, there came a rumbling sound from the sky. A waft of clouds formed darkly overhead, and suddenly the whole sky opened up, and the much-needed rain poured down on them. It was, so the legend goes, the beginning of the peace pipe. Since we left the Columbia ice field, our road has dropped almost 2,500 feet. Our road will drop even more and take us out into the open, and will finally land us at the Sunwapta Junction. From the junction, a spur road off our highway leads a quarter of a mile through the woods to a small parking area opposite the falls and upper canyon of the Sunwapta River. The Sunwapta, which has been lost to view, has been flowing northwest. Here, it suddenly changes its course and heads southwest, taking a wild leap into a deep canyon. Then, after a mile and a half of frenzied flowing, it joins the main Athabasca River on the valley flat. Sunwapta Falls Junction marks the halfway point of this tape, so after you turn me off on signal, please flip me over to side 2 as directed on your player. When we leave this viewpoint, our road will follow the valley of the Athabasca all the way till we reach the town of Jasper. Have we gone 24 miles from Stutfield Glacier viewpoint? If not, we may still have a few miles to go before reaching our next viewpoint. The parking area for the Sunwapta Junction viewpoint, by the way, is on the left side of the road. Now you may turn me off and turn me over. We're now headed for what is called the Goat Viewpoint, and that is 10 6/10 miles from here. Like all national parks in North America, Jasper is a sanctuary for wildlife. Although we have a large variety of animals who call this area home, it's not likely you'll get to see every species, because after all, a national park is not a zoo. Here, animals are free to come and go as they wish. They can, if they choose, avoid goggling sightseers like us, and many of the more timid ones do. Others just naturally live in high, out-of-the-reach places and seldom come down to where the tourists are. At our next stop, It's possible, if you look up on the sides of the mountains, to see some mountain goats. These fellows prefer high altitudes, and evidently everything they need to keep them happy can be found in the upper reaches. Their diet includes grass, shrubs, forbs, and the lichens which grow on scanty soil among the rocks. How they get at this food during the deep snow periods is a mystery to me. Another favorite dining room of theirs are the clay banks just below our next viewpoint. There they supplement their diet with, of all things, clay. It may sound awful, but clay is chock full of minerals, which any nutrition-conscious goat knows is good for his health. Mountain goats have black curved horns, which are never shed. The average length is about 8 or 9 inches, but there are some that grow as long as 11 inches. Behind each horn is the goat's scent glands. During mating season in September, those glands create a scent that inspires even the most lackadaisical goat's romantic instincts. During the season of love, sweet love, some of the more powerful billy goats are said to collect a whole harem, while the little fellows have to be content with a single lady friend. Because they live on such high sloped ranges, a goat's worst enemies are landslides, bitter storms, and starvation. They are also frequent victims of predatory birds and beasts. From above, golden eagles have been known to swoop down and make off with innocent little kid goats. And if they should happen to make a trip below, mountain goats fall prey to cougar, bears, and hungry wolves. To add to all the threats against their lives, years ago the hide of the mountain goat was in great demand among Indians, because it's the only North American wild animal which produces wool. It's amazing that being so attractive to so many species for so many reasons, the poor mountain goat has managed to survive at all. One thing we know, however, is that man does not hunt the mountain goat for food. In fact, except for the young billies, the meat of this animal is so tough that natives here have worked up a ridiculous recipe, which they give as a joke to tourists. It goes something like this. Take 1 chunk of mountain goat meat and 1 large rock. Put both in a huge pot. Boil for several hours. When the rock is soft enough so that you can pierce it with a fork, the mountain goat meat is ready to serve. The earliest guardians of law and order in the park were the world-famous Royal Canadian Mounted Police. The Mounties are one of the best-known law enforcement agencies in the world. If you're as old as I, you might remember those great old movies where the daring heroes in their dramatic red uniforms dashed in to save the girl, the forest, and the world if necessary. In my memory, these bold actions always included Nelson Eddy singing at the top of his lungs across the forest to Jeanette MacDonald. But that was only the movie version of the Northwest Mounted Police. They were actually organized on May 23, 1873, as a result of the opening of the Western Prairies. By 1886, barracks for 10 Mounties were set up in Banff. Their devotion to service soon won them recognition by King Edward VII, who ceremoniously added the prefix Royal to their name, so that officially their name became Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Horses are no longer used by the Banff and Jasper RCMP. At one time, motorcycles were used for patrol duty, but they too have been discontinued. The small force which policed this vast dominion of Canada in 1873 increased steadily until in 1940 it had reached an all-time high of almost 4,000 men. Since that time, possibly due to the war, it's decreased considerably. Today's version of the daring, dashing Mounties is the park's district warden. The park is broken down into a number of sections, and each section has its own park warden. If a profile of a typical park warden were to be drawn, it would probably show a fearless, dedicated law enforcement officer, a rugged outdoorsman, and a man with an inherent love for plant and animal life. The responsibilities of a park warden include the safety of all people traveling or visiting his district, as well as the protection of all animal and plant life. In order to do his job, a park warden must be an expert wilderness traveler. He has to know how to travel by horse, by foot, and during desolate winters, on skis. He must know how to cope with every possible kind of wilderness emergency, from forest fires and avalanches to lost hikers and poachers. A park warden's district can cover, as in the case of the Sunwapta Warden District, as much as 500 square miles. So it's easy to see how sometimes a warden can be away from district headquarters for a month at a time as he performs his rounds of duty. Of course, while he may be away physically, he's seldom out of touch with headquarters for any length of time. As guardian of all human and natural life in his district, the park warden's duties are awesome and demanding. As a result, he's an alert, courageous, and dedicated member of the park's personnel. If you enjoy boating, the placid waters of the many lakes of Jasper should appeal to you. You can pass many relaxing hours paddling a canoe along the winding waterways, watching for beaver dams, ducks, and other waterfowl. You may even find a moose or more. I put it that way because I never seem to remember the plural for moose. Anyhow, you may see a few of them grazing at the brink of a lake. Canoes and rowboats are available for rent at some of the lakes. Or if you want to wait till you get to Jasper, you can arrange to rent one there. Powerboats are allowed only on certain lakes, and you have to get a permit from the Warden Service in order to use a powerboat. The permits are free, but mandatory. This subject of boating reminds me of a conversation I heard once when I was doing this tour live. There were two little boys in my group, both about 10-ish. I was explaining about boating in Jasper, and one of the little fellows turned to the other and said, "Say, did you ever row a bicycle?" The other one answered, "Of course not. Nobody can row a bicycle." First boy waited a minute and then stated arbitrarily, "You're wrong. Just yesterday I rode a bicycle." Which brings me to the subject of bicycling. Cycling has enjoyed a new wave of popularity here in the last few years. Tourists found it a smashing way to get off the main highways. So if you want to ride a bike, you may rent one in Jasper. At this point, we may have a few more miles to drive before reaching Goat Viewpoint, because it's very possible that you'll see some of the park's wildlife meandering about that parking area. I suggest you get your cameras ready. Look for the parking area. It's on the left side of the road. Now, click me off, and don't click me on again till after we leave the parking area at Goat Viewpoint and are back on this road. Our next viewpoint, Athabasca Falls, is 3.5 miles from here. You'll have to make a left turn, and the parking area is actually 500 yards off the main road. Just keep your eyes peeled for the signs directing us to the parking area. One of the highlights of our next stop is the spectacular descent of the Athabasca River. The beginnings of this river are back at Columbia ice fields. As it flows, it becomes fattened up by 3 other bodies of water which feed into it along the way. Swollen and milky with silt from glaciers, the Athabasca reaches and swirls around the base of Mount Kirkesland. Then, taking a sudden turn, it discovers its path blocked and narrowed down by jutting rocks. Forced between these, it leaps wildly into the deep, narrow gorge below. This is the dynamic, dramatic Athabasca Falls you are about to see. As the river plunges, it divides itself into 3 curtain-like parts. The center curtain, carrying the main body of water, booms like thunder as it strikes with terrific force against the opposite wall and is thrown back into the main stream, where it churns, seethes, and flings up columns of spray that reach far above the treetops. While this symphony of sound and motion dominates the scene, up above the canyon in a pool, an eerie ballet is being performed by a dozen pine trees, entreshotting around in a never-ending dance. Apparently, some years ago, these pines drifted down here, and because they couldn't force their way through the narrow passages, were condemned to a sort of circular water limbo. To the east, you can see a mountain whose rocks seem to be bending toward each other. That's Mount Kirkeslen. It has a uniqueness, geologically speaking, among the mountains of this area. The piles of rock above its tree line are actually layers and layers of Precambrian and Cambrian quartzites. Incidentally, if you hear someone referring to Mount Kirkeslen as synclinal, they're talking about its shape. As you've noticed, mountains have distinctive shapes. In this park, they fall into about 8 categories. When erosion carves a bowl in a mountain range and the rocks around the bowl lean toward each other, this shape is called synclinal. Mount Kirkeslen is considered a perfect example of this formation. Now this is important. From the parking area at the falls, it's easy for you to get sidetracked and go by mistake on to Route 93A. Do not do that. Make sure you drive back to Route 93 where we are now. Otherwise, for the rest of the trip, we'll be in the same car, but we'll be taking different tours. When we're on 93, turn me on again. As for now, turn me off. Now, we're back on 93 and not 93A, right? Okay, here it's important to check your mileage gauge. In 3 9/10 miles, we'll arrive at our next viewpoint, Mount Edith Cavell. I want you to check the mileage because this viewpoint may not have advanced signs telling you the viewpoint is coming up. The parking area is on the left side of the road, so be on the lookout for it. Meanwhile, we are now in a mountain plant zone, making it botanically one of the most interesting areas of the country. Strange as it may seem, it's in the chill air of the higher altitudes that nature grows her loveliest wildflower gardens. Hundreds of varieties are lavished on the Canadian Rockies. You could stop anywhere along this highway, take a short walk through the woods to the border of a stream, and you'd find 50 different kinds of wildflowers in half an hour. The most characteristic flower, and the one that sprouts everywhere, is the Indian paintbrush. It grows in several shades, from cream to red, and its stiff little torch of color brightens roadsides and hillsides throughout the park. In early summer, the western wood lily grows abundantly, and the water willow herb can be seen flashing its masses of light purple from the borders of streams. Also in late summer, you'll find a lot of purplish-colored weeds filling the riverbeds. This is called fireweed because it grows up from the potash decay left behind by fires. In the mountains, the flower calendar varies with the altitudes. As we go upward, the hand of the year moves backward. In the lower valley, spring starts about the middle of April. But higher up, June may be half over before spring sets in. That, of course, is because it takes that long for the snows to melt up there. But the moment the snow is gone, millions of little plants, most of them crouching low for protection, burst out like children let out for the holidays. As a matter of fact, they don't have much more time than children do on their summer vacations, because in less than 2 months, the chill of winter will send the little plants scurrying back beneath the soil. In that short a time, these plants have to bud, leaf, blossom, fertilize, and ripen seed, a job which valley flowers take their own sweet time about. With so much to do in so little time, one wonders why these mountain plants even bother to come out. Yet during its brief spring season, the high meadows are a riot of color and fragrance, with blue forget-me-nots, larkspurs, golden arnicas, violets, columbines, white dryas, heliotropes, and many others showing off their own kind of beauty. Thanks to this highway, these beautiful alpine meadows, formerly seen only by mountain climbers and explorers, can now be enjoyed by all of us. If you have the time, I think it's worth the short walk up to one of the mountain passes where the profusion of color and fragrance of these natural gardens reach their height. Some wildly beautiful flowers burgeon above timberline. That's about 6,500 to about 7,000 feet above sea level. If you took one of those trips, you'd see, among others, pink and red mountain heath, white mountain heather, forget-me-not, mountain rhododendron, one-flowered wintergreen, moss campion, northern gentian, and the Arctic hairball. Although it is the alpine zone, you won't find true Edelweiss, the kind found in Switzerland. But you will find the Rockies have their own beautiful everlastings. From the parking area at our next stop, a marker will point out the peak of Mount Edith Cavell. The peak was named after a World War I heroine. A nurse in charge of a British hospital in Belgium, she was shot for her underground work, helping British and Belgian prisoners escape from German occupation troops. Turn me off now, please. Talk to you soon. We're now on the last lap of our auto tape tour, heading for the town of Jasper, which is 14 miles from here. Did you know that nearly all of Canada's hot springs are right here in the western mountains? These heated sulfurous waters start out as rain or snow falling on the mountains. It then percolates downward through cracks, fissures, and faults. When it penetrates deep, it becomes heated by the internal heat of the earth. The heated water rises through cracks in the rocks, condenses into water, and gushes out as hot springs. On its way up, the steam and hot water dissolve the limestone rock, which has a high sulfur content. It's the hydrogen sulfide, if you want to know the scientific term, that gives the water its unusual odor. Hot springs have interested mankind for many centuries. Since the time of Hippocrates, the father of medicine, people have believed in hot springs as an effective aid to health. Long before the white man turned up in the Rockies, the Indians knew of the hot springs. Because most of them were superstitious, the Indians feared these hot waters, which bubbled so mysteriously from the bowels of the earth. When the first white men arrived, Indians told them fearsome stories of the Bow Valley and its strange, powerful, steamy waters. Nowhere, they were sure, did the rivers run more wildly. Nowhere was the voice of the thunderbird more terrifying. They believed hot springs were the home of evil spirits. Alarmed by the tales, many a white man refused to go on the expedition. But the surveyors who came to lay out a route for the railway were more sophisticated. One Indian told of the night he stumbled upon a strange cave. He peered down through the opening in the roof and saw a frenzied dance being done by the evil spirits in a boiling pot. He described how the floor of the dark cave was covered with the skulls and bones of the victims of the evil spirits. These white men assured the Indian, "We will build an iron horse which will run through the mountains so fast that no evil spirits will be able to catch it." Of course, a few years later, the railroad was completed, and the Indians saw the first iron horse speed across the mountains. I'm sure they were impressed with the white man's power to build an iron beast, but I'm not so sure the presence of the railroad ever assuaged the Indians' fear of the hot springs. So far, I've mentioned the different kinds of wildlife, but I seem to have neglected the birds. As a matter of fact, there are over 200 different kinds of birds in Jasper National Park. One you're very likely to see, especially if you open a picnic basket, is the whiskey jack. His name does not come from the fact that he likes hard liquor or that his mating call sounds like hiccups. Actually, it's a corruption of Wissagatchek, the name the Indians had for the bird. The whiskey jack is a two-toned gray with a large tail, which he manages awkwardly. According to an old Indian legend, at one time, the whiskey jack's tail was too short, his wings too small, and his head too large for his body. He was so funny-looking that all the other birds laughed at him. One day, the sad little bird decided to do something about his looks. He would make new wings and a new tail for himself. Then, when he went to the big annual spring meeting of the birds, he wouldn't be embarrassed. He begged and collected a pile of feathers from prettier birds and spent many hours fashioning what he thought would be a handsome set of wings and a long, graceful tail. Finally, when he was finished, he tried them on and was quite pleased with his new image. He thought he looked as big and handsome as any bird around. He was thrilled and decided to fly to visit some friends and show off the beautiful new him. As he took off, he couldn't manage his oversized wings and tail. And if the other birds laughed at him before, he was afraid now he would really have them rolling on the branches. Discouraged and ashamed, he flew clumsily off into the forest and lived there by himself, very lonely. At last, the great Manitou of the birds appeared. He explained to the poor little bird that if he hadn't been so vain about his appearance, he wouldn't be in such trouble now. The lonely bird agreed, and was so remorseful that the great Manitou of birds took pity on him. "It is too late to change your feathers, little bird," he said, "but since you are so lonely, I will talk to the Indians, who always have a kind heart for lonely birds and animals. I will ask them to always welcome you at their feasts." From that day on, the Whiskey Jack has always been a welcome guest among feasting Indians. If the legend is true, we might assume that the Indians shared their food with the Whiskey Jack. Some skeptics, though, maintain that they were welcomed, not as guests, but as the main course. At any rate, to this day, the Whiskey Jack is very likely to turn up wherever people are picnicking in the park. From our car, you may be able to watch a golden eagle planing magnificently above the heights, observe the blue flash of the belted kingfisher, or hear the sharp, riveting sound of the woodpecker or the yellow-shafted flicker. On the trail, the chickadee's cheerful little song often relieves the solitude of the forest, while in every alpine garden, even up to the very verge of the perpetual snows, you may see the tiny rufous hummingbird. Then, of course, there's the Franklin's grouse, a very common little fellow in these parts. He is either so stupid or so friendly that he never suspects danger and will often fly right down in front of an oncoming car. So when I tell you you might run into the fool hen, that's his nickname, I mean it literally. So do watch out for him, won't you? By the way, now that you're practically at Jasper town site, it does seem a little late to mention it, but I will anyhow. The climate of the park does not appeal to either reptiles or amphibians. It's too cold for them. Whatever few snakes may be found in the park, and believe me, it's extremely rare to find any, they are not poisonous. There are absolutely no poisonous snakes in either Banff or Jasper National Parks. The town of Jasper has a permanent population of over 3,000 people. Like the park itself, Jasper is administered by the National Parks of Canada. Administration is in the hands of a resident superintendent, assisted by the warden service, interpretive service, visitor service, and the engineering staff. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police patrol the town and highways and help maintain law and order. The land in the town of Jasper is owned by the government, and they lease it to individuals for business and residential purposes. The town of Jasper lies in the sheltered, friendly valley between the Miette and the Athabasca rivers. At one time, this valley was a lake, but time and the vicissitudes of Mother Nature caused the lake to vanish, leaving mankind a delightful spot to establish a town. One of the most interesting things you'll see in town is the fabulous totem pole, which stands near the railway station. This pole stands 56 feet high. A totem pole is a sort of a family coat of arms, indicating a phratry of a family or group of families. Phratry means the family's supernatural guardian. In this case, the raven at the top of the pole shows that this particular family's phratry was the raven. The legend of this family's or tribe's history is carved in the totem pole. Certain Indian legends say that the raven, a supernatural being, half man and half divinity, found man living in a clam shell. The raven rescued man and developed him into a kind and honorable being. He endowed him with the gifts of light, fire, food, and water, and taught him the arts and virtues. As a sort of patron saint, the raven devoted his being to directing his disciples to good hunting and fishing grounds when food grew scarce. Each phratry, or guardian angel, or whatever you want to call it, looked after his own people and therefore became the symbol of that family or tribe. At Jasper, there is something for everyone in the family when it comes to outdoor recreation. You'll find miles of delightful woodland trails for riding and several stables where horses can be rented. As far as climbing is concerned, you'll find peaks of every kind. If you're a rank amateur or the most skilled climber, there's a peak you can enjoy scaling. At Jasper Lodge, there's a championship golf course and a superb picturesque setting. If you want to fish, there are dozens of lakes and streams which can be easily reached by car. And for open-air bathing, you have Lakes Annette and Edith and the hot springs near the eastern boundary of the park. One of the outstanding features of the Athabasca Valley at Jasper is the number and beauty of its lakes. Wherever you go, you find one. While you're in Jasper, you really should visit Medicine Lake and Moline Lake. Medicine Lake is famous as the Disappearing Lake. In July and August, it's an ordinary lake, about 4 miles long and half a mile wide. In September and October, the water level begins to drop, and by November, the lake is almost completely gone. Then, in late spring and early summer, the melting snows on the mountains begin to pour water into the Medicine Lake Basin once again. By early summer, again, it's an ordinary lake, about 4 miles long and half a mile wide. The exquisitely colored waters and the towering summits surrounding Moline Lake have made it a scene of inspiration to countless artists and photographers from all corners of the globe. You can get to Moline Lake from Jasper by car, or you can take a package tour. The trip from Jasper to the lake is in itself famous for its spectacular parade of majestic peaks, shimmering cascades, and glistening glaciers. On the lake, you may take a journey on a launch that will take you to the south end of the lake. Or if you prefer, you can take one of the fisherman's specials. That's where you're given a boat and sent off to try your luck in the productive bays. For tranquility and unsurpassed natural beauty, a trip to Moline Lake is in order. On your rental agreement, there's a notation at the bottom which tells you the name of the Auto Tape Tour concessionaire in Jasper. After you turn me off, go to the concessionaire. Your deposit will be refunded when you return the player. I hope you've enjoyed your drive from the ice fields to Jasper. We look forward to having you take Auto Tape Tours on other trips through national parks throughout Canada and the United States. Enjoy your stay at Jasper. This is Bob Maxwell saying, you may turn me off now, and thanks for being such nice travel companions.